Oh, hi! Welcome to Aquatazoo, where we like to nerd out over all things zoo and aquarium related. I'm l.semple, and today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about transparency in animal care. I'm sure you've seen all of the shows, and perhaps you've gone to a zoo or aquarium and you've seen the behind the scenes tour available to you, or animal encounters, or anything like that. And that is all kind of a method by which our organizations are trying to maintain transparency. Why would our organizations want to do that? We want to make sure that the public understands that we're trying to take very good care of our animals, and we don't want to be compared to perhaps viral issues and stories in the news or shows that are made about really, really poor animal care. We want to distance ourselves from that as much as possible. So you will see a lot of AZA accredited zoos and aquariums kind of involved with more interesting opportunities to invite guests or prospective guests into our operations so that you can kind of see for yourself with your own eyes what we're up to and the innovations that we're making when it comes to animal care. We don't really want anyone to think that we're trying to hide anything about animal care or that we're letting animals suffer behind some closed doors or something like that. We're trying to make the best decisions that we can for an animal's health and well-being in all of the ways. So their psychological state, their mental state, their physical state, like all of these aspects of animal welfare, we're trying to optimize and make as good as we possibly can for the benefit of that animal and for the benefit of our guests, because the happier, quote unquote, that an animal is, or the more comfortable, the less stress they endure, the more likely that they're going to do natural behaviors and live a very full and fulfilling life while in our exhibits or in our organizations, so that the guests can see that happening, right? They're not just seeing an animal in a plain box sitting there staring at them, right, as they stare at the animal. It's not like that. It kind of once was, honestly, in zoos and aquariums. Like, it was very minimal because they wanted to highlight the animal. There's the animal. It's feet away from you, and it's not got anything interesting to do or stuff to climb on or whatever. Like, there's not really a whole lot by way of enrichment or interest in the exhibit design. It's just, there's a box, there's an animal inside box. And yeah, that's how it used to be for a while. But now, these days, we're trying to optimize our design for exhibits and enrichment opportunities, and, the way that we select animals and how we have them presented to the public. Like, there's a lot of thought and preparation that goes into all of that, so that in the end, the animal is experiencing a very naturalistic kind of life in the exhibits where they are. They have the right food, they have the right medical care, they have the right social structure, they have things to keep them entertained just like they would in, their natural habitat. All of this is coming together so that there is a really kind of dynamic, interesting exhibit that guests can enjoy. And by maintaining that transparency about us trying so hard to make the animals' lives interesting and fun, guests then have no reason to believe that we're doing anything nefarious. We're being upfront about it all. We're inviting them into what's happening, and therefore they can help us, raise the standard, raise the expectations of other zoos and aquariums, right? We want to be the best at what we do. We all want to be the best at what we do. And so raising the expectations and being very open and honest about what we're doing and how it's happening and, why we make the decisions that we make, it helps people understand those animals better, care about those animals a little bit more, which then, it enhances our overall mission, right? To connect people with animals most of the time, or to, help people understand the natural world. So if you're wondering why there are more shows that showcase this kind of thing, these kinds of jobs, it's to highlight that organization. It's to highlight the dedication of its staff. It's just interesting and fun because you get to see how zookeepers and aquarists care for some of these really, really specialized animals, these delicate animals, and you get to see how that organization does its work. all spectrums of the work, right? There's lots of different things going on in any average zoo or aquarium. There's conservation work going, there's science happening, research going on. There's, cleaning, of course. There's interaction with guests. There's all sorts of aspects to the business that we do that we're inviting guests into because we want to be transparent about it so that they understand and can see for themselves the thought, the preparation, the care that goes into the daily operations of a zoo or aquarium. So they feel a little bit more reassured, I guess, that they're not wasting their money when they go to that zoo or aquarium to visit. They're supporting this really active, interesting work, and they kind of, I don't know, understand a little bit more about exactly where those dollars go when they make a donation or buy a ticket. They understand what's going on. Bringing guests into the animal care side of what's happening also helps create keepers of tomorrow, keepers and aquarists of tomorrow. I know that when I was young, I went to an aquarium that had whales and dolphins, and for some reason I had just thought like the only option for work in that field, well, the only two options, I guess, were to be a trainer of dolphins and whales or to be a veterinarian. And I wasn't really feeling either of those just because I was not a bubbly type personality that's typical of the trainers in that scenario. And I also wasn't really interested. I knew how vets got their education, and it starts with, small pet practice. So, dealing with cats and dogs and in little animals and stuff, you might have to deal with also, agriculture, animals and things. And I wasn't really interested in doing all of that just to eventually get to exotics. And then finally, get to exotics and deal with exotics being zoos or aquariums, right? So I thought those were the only two options, right? At the time, granted, again, I was a kid. Then we happened to go through a behind the scenes tour, and I saw the kitchen, the food prep area where they got the food for the sharks ready. And there was no one in there. The lights were off. Nothing was happening. It was, for all intents and purposes, very boring. But that flipped a switch in my brain because I realized that there was a whole team of other people who take care of the non-whale and dolphin animals. And then I was thrilled, right? Those people were doing something entirely different, and that called to me right away. I would never have known about that had I not seen it. Even though I should have known that there was someone who was taking care of all those other animals that I had seen that were not whales and dolphins, I had not necessarily seen them in action and did not realize that that was an option as far as jobs go. So going through that behind the scenes tour was the reason that I understood that there was a whole different job type in that aquarium. Granted, there were many other job types in that aquarium that I did not realize were a thing either, but I happened to see that one and I really connected with that one. So by inviting guests into our behind the scenes areas and letting them see what we're doing through TV shows and things like that, we're possibly connecting with future aquarists and keepers of tomorrow. They can see exactly how we're doing the jobs that we're doing. It's something that was not available to me as a child, but it is available to today's children, right? And they may not be interested in that. They may think it's gross. That's fine. But it's one of those things. That's why outreach programs are very important for zoos and aquariums to partake in as well, because sometimes kids just don't realize that this is a field of work that could be for them. They don't know it because they've never seen it. They've never been exposed to it. Whether they've been to a zoo or aquarium or not, they may not know that that's an actual job that they could possibly have, or a field that they might be interested in. They might not want to be a keeper, right? They might want to go into research, but being able to see staff from a zoo or keepers themselves doing research with those animals, with observations or something like that, the most common type that I would say that we do, then they can make that connection. Like, that's science, right? That's science at work. And behavioral science is like a whole different ball game, right? They wouldn't know unless they're exposed to that. So, and I'm almost a little embarrassed because I was going to a zoo as a kid all the time. There was a free one in my hometown. And so we went a lot, but it never, since it was a zoo and I loved ocean things, I always loved the ocean. I didn't make the connection that that was a field of work that I could be in. And so when I went to this one aquarium on the other side of the country and saw the empty food prep kitchen, my brain just about exploded. It was clean, it was nice, it smelled vaguely of fish, but that's a food prep kitchen for you in an aquarium. They just do that. And I realized that there was a job there that I could do and that I was interested in and that I was shifting my aim for. And getting in touch with kids like that is why we do this, right? This is why we invite camera crews in to see what we're doing and how we operate, how we make decisions about animals' care. And this is why we have behind the scenes tours. It's kind of a pain, I'm not going to lie, to have guests in some of these areas where we're trying to work, but it's important because we want them to be sure that they understand that we're trying to give the best experience for these animals. We're trying to do really solid work on behalf of those animals. We're trying to take very good care of them. We spend a lot of time making sure that they're in good health, that they're eating the right foods, that they're getting their exercise, that they're, having an interesting day in their environment, right? And so we put so much effort into that, and we want people to understand how hard that is and how much we care, right? We want to make sure that they know that we've got a clean facility that's operating well, that the animals are always first and foremost, that we're not taking advantage or exploiting any animals, right? We're trying to do the best we can to make sure that they live full, healthy, natural type lives. The challenge with this sometimes is that zoos and aquariums understand that there is, some financial benefit to offering this transparency. It affects revenue directly, right? If people know that you're taking good care of animals, more guests are going to come in and see what you're doing. And if they watch a TV show and they see how good of the animals you're caring for, they might want to go and have that experience. You're gaining money. Like, there's revenue involved, but there's always a challenge of making sure that things don't go too far as the revenue goes. We're trying to maintain really good care, and sometimes some of these events, activities, offers of transparency can be intrusive and affect the animal care and the animal welfare. I'll just use an example that I deal with on a regular basis. When we do scuba diving for an aquarium and we have dive operations happening, that's a very serious situation, right? We generally do not have, at least in my facility, we do not have the behind the scenes tours going while the dive operations on our main exhibit are happening. Why is that? It's a safety issue. Our walkways are relatively narrow, and so we need to be able to move all the way around the tank as required. This is our main large exhibit. Other smaller exhibits, it may be an option, but not for this one. So the walkways are very narrow, and we want to be able to move freely around the tank, and I don't want to have to kind of shove guests out of the way to be able to get to safety equipment or something like that, or get to a door so that we can get a diver out of the water and out of the facility, right? We just don't want to cause panic like that either with the guests. So for safety reasons and for animal care reasons, just in case an animal gets spooked or something like that, it doesn't really happen. They're used to us diving, but if an animal were to get spooked and start splashing or, injure themselves or something like that, we don't want guests around for that, right? We don't want them to see an injured diver because diving is a dangerous activity. We want to make sure that they are not around to see anything happen with the divers or be in the way if something did happen with the divers or the animals, right? So for safety reasons, we have restricted when our tours are running, because normally they would be running around, the top of our largest tank so they could see all the cool animals in there, but we don't do it during dive time. So that's just, trying to, even though we could sell more tickets and have more people be interested in seeing how a dive actually happens, and that could generate some revenue, we don't do that for safety reasons. Now, a compromise there could be that we have a live like camera feed running so that people could just watch what happens during the dives, right? They might not be in the way or see everything that's going on. Like, we're not doing anything nefarious, so I'd be happy to have people see how dive operations run. However, for safety reasons, we try to not have many people around on top of our exhibit while we're diving, so that the divers, if there were something that went wrong, we have all the freedom in the world to move and get that person out and get them to safety or to the hospital, whatever. We could mitigate that by setting up a camera and allowing people to see that kind of thing. I'm not sure if that would be interesting or not. It could cut our revenue into the tours, because it would make more money to have the tours, but we sacrifice that on behalf of safety. And so there are other activities that are kind of like that, where you realize that an animal's getting stressed out, and so we cut a animal encounter short, right? You got to pay a little extra, or get this special privilege to see an animal up close and personal, like an interaction, one-on-one type of thing. But if those animals start to show signs of being stressed out by what's happening, then we'll probably just cut the interaction short. So there is some sort of effect on revenue when we do that kind of thing, because it's not quite as nice as what the guests envisioned and what they paid for, right? But we'll not sacrifice animal welfare or safety for revenue, So we want guests to come in and see and experience and see with their own eyes and understand what we're doing behind the scenes for the animals and for our staff, trying to make sure everybody's safe and that the animals are healthy, but we won't sacrifice their access for safety or animal welfare. So when we're developing these opportunities, these extra add-ons, whatever, we're trying to gain money for the institutions so that we can do more for conservation or research or whatever. However we're applying those extra funds, we are trying to generate revenue that way. But also, when we have discussions about possibilities as far as interesting programs that we want to implement that involve animals or involve staff, animal care staff specifically, we have to understand that things happen, that animals do wild stuff because they are wild animals, and that sometimes we're going to have to cut things short or not have that program available on schedule. And as much as that annoys guests, I totally understand. Animals dictate what our day is going to look like when you're working in animal care. So if some other animal gets injured or we have to do a surgery or something like that, that's going to take precedence over conducting a program where we're inviting our guests behind the scenes to do and see all sorts of different things, because we need to concentrate all of our effort on that animal welfare and the animal care rather than making it all beautiful and pristine for guests to come see what we're doing. And that's a discussion that happens when we're developing these programs. Some facilities are willing to take that potential cancellation and others are not. And so unless it's a sure thing and we have a plan B, they may not want to implement that program to start with, right? So, if something were to happen with an animal or animal care team and they couldn't do the program as originally designed, that might be having animal surgery on display, right? It does happen. There are lots of facilities that have active vet labs and vet hospitals, and they do surgery and physicals right there in front of the guests. So you probably won't see a whole lot as far as scheduling for some of that stuff, like from the guest perspective, because stuff happens. We might schedule a physical for an animal at 10 a.m. and not be able to effectively bring that animal for its physical. Just stuff happens. Sometimes it's not worth the stress to capture that animal and bring them in, or they're not responding to their training, so they're not walking in on their own. Like, there's 100 million different things that could happen. And that if you have an advertised physical time in the vet hospital, that it may not work out for whatever reason. People hate that because they came to see that physical happen, right? They came to see the animal on the table getting looked at and measured or whatever, because it's really interesting. It is legitimately part of our operations. But, other things happen that are kind of out of our control. And so not everything goes perfectly to plan all the time. And so we try to be very careful about how we're inviting guests in for our transparency to see how we operate, because animals do wild stuff and they will flip your schedule and your plan on a whim. You'll never expect it. They do something crazy and you got to respond. You got to make sure that, an animal's taken care of. And so suddenly the physical that you had planned for this animal over here is not going to happen. And instead we're doing surgery on that animal over there for whatever reason, right? And so we have to be careful with how we present some of these programs to the public, just because we don't want to give them the impression that anything's like a sure thing, rain or shine, because it never is. As soon as you plan something, some other animal is going to need something that you were not expecting. So that is kind of how it works, which makes the whole inviting everyone in for transparency's sake very difficult, but not impossible. We've found ways to get around it. You'll see with the TV shows, it's a really kind of easy way to present your organization and its operations in an edited way, I guess. And then I'm not saying that people are not being honest or organizations are not being honest about how they're being presented. I'm just saying that they are doing those things. They are having those discussions that are happening on the screen. They are going through all of those things. They just might not be happening on the timeline that was originally requested, right? Because our work is very dynamic. Our animals in our collection dictate what we're up to every day, whether we like it or not. So if the film crew is filming the content, they can kind of put it together and make it make sense over, the 20 minutes to an hour of showtime that they have. There's a whole lot going into that episode with various different cases with animals and, activities that the keepers and the vet staff are doing with the animals. But they can kind of condense it into like a nice little package for people to consume as they go about their day. And that's a very edited, nice version of a nice compact version of what we're going through every day. Whereas if you're just coming in and seeing, various different activities that we're actually doing as it's happening, sometimes this stuff takes a long time. It gets really boring. You're hoping that an animal is going to do something with the enrichment that you just gave them, and they just don't. And it's okay. It's just not very exciting to see. I can't tell you how many times I've been kind of stopped when I'm carrying a small bucket of food and people recognize kind of what it is. Like they know I'm doing something, and I'll get stopped and say, oh my gosh, are you feeding? And it's like, yes, I'm feeding, but it's the jellyfish. Do not expect them to, go leaping for the food, because they just don't. And then I kind of invite them along. They're absolutely, welcome to come with me to see what I'm doing, but inevitably they are not entranced by what's happening. Because if you've never seen a jellyfish feeding, we just kind of dump the food in there and jellyfish kind of happen by it and grab it up as they go, but it's so small that it's not very exciting to see. Like the animals don't visibly react necessarily, so it's not that exciting. They're welcome to come with me, and I'm happy to talk to them about jellies. But it's one of the most boring feeds that we do, but it has to happen all the time. So, people recognize when we're up to things, and they're more than welcome to come with us and see how we do it. However, it is not always the thrill fest that people have built as envisioned in their mind. The same thing happened for another organization that I used to work for, where they would invite donors to see our shark feeding, our main shark exhibit. And while that sounds really fascinating and very exciting, it was not, because our sharks were older and they just kind of didn't feel like eating that much anymore. They were very healthy animals. They were doing very well in their exhibit, but sometimes they just didn't feel like eating. And so we would basically be brushing their teeth with fish, trying to get them to eat something. And they would just shake their head and swim away. They just didn't want it. And so that was a really kind of interesting experience, I'm sure, for the donors that came in and took advantage of the opportunity, because they thought that it was going to be this Jaws-like feeding frenzy, and it was definitely not. It was quite the opposite, and some of the fish were more exciting than what was going on with the sharks specifically. So, people have an idea in their mind of how all this works, and then when they see the reality, they might be a little bit disappointed. But it doesn't matter. The point is that we're trying to be transparent with them so that they can see for themselves that we are doing the right things, that we're trying to take really, really good care of these animals, how much our staff cares. I always love to let people know how much our staff cares. Because they do. Even though the majority of them are quote unquote behind the scenes type of people, as am I would prefer that no one ever know that I was there, right? You just see the aquarium working seamlessly and you never know how that happened, right? It's part of the magic. We keep the show going, right? Like the exhibits looking great. We have the animals looking healthy, good body weight, all that fun stuff. They're doing their natural behaviors, and you never really put any thought into the staff that's behind that, right? How does that happen? How do our animals look so good and have such good health? We have a great team of veterinarians. We have a great team of animal care staff who are never seen. Unless you have the opportunity to have like a vet lab available where, the vet activities are on display, or if you happen to see the animal care people out doing their jobs, you might see them, or you could see them in a behind the scenes tour or on a show, a TV show on Netflix or something like that, where you can really get an idea of what they're up to every day. Those shows are pretty accurate. Like we are doing those things every day. I've watched a good number of them, and the discussions are real. Like, I know it's partially kind of staged and edited a little bit, but these are challenges that we face on a regular basis. These are problems that we're trying to solve. These are discussions that we have, regarding the health of an animal and euthanasia and that kind of thing. Like, these are real. This is actually how this works. And kudos to these organizations who have invited these camera crews into their organizations and allowed them to show what it's like to deal with animal care and deal with all of these various different types of animals that we have, their vet stuff, their challenging issues that they're facing with animal care, all of that. It's just trying to be transparent so that you, the guest, understand what we're up to and how we take care of the animals, and you're exposed to a different type of job. Could be veterinarian, could be animal care, could be nutritionist or conservation biologist or scientist or anything like that. There's lots of science happening at all these facilities. And so any kid who might be interested in going into school and studying science, here's how it can be practical. Here are jobs that are available that employ that interest that you have, right? And so this is how and why we want to be transparent about what we're doing, so that you have the peace of mind that knowing that you're supporting good organizations, so that our viewers and guests can see for themselves what we're up to and feel peace with that, and so that they learn something new, connect with, the natural world and animals and care about them. Because that's part of our mission. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to connect our guests with the natural world and educate them about animals and make sure that they understand why these animals are so great and so important, all the niche things that they do and the purposes that they serve in their ecosystems, right? It's all really important, and we want them to care so that they make good choices down the line that affect the animals in the end, right? Pollution. Don't throw your stuff out the car window and litter, and, try to fight for things that will help preserve natural spaces so that these animals have some place to live, So they're not all in zoos and aquariums, because that would be a tragedy. So that's why we try to maintain all of this transparency. We want you, the guests, to see all of this so that you understand what we're up to, why we're doing it. You understand more about the animals themselves and what's going on, so that we can all work together to try and preserve the animal world as best we can. There's limited space out there, and limited habitats, and the more humans use all of this land and the resources, the less that's available for animals. That's kind of the point. So we certainly invite you in, but we're not going to sacrifice animal care or safety. If you have any questions about that or any other zoo or aquarium or leadership things, let me know. You can write it up in an email and send it to me at aquatazoo@gmail.com. If you're enjoying the show, and I hope that you do, don't forget you can follow or subscribe on your podcast player of choice. That way you'll get all of that sweet, sweet content as soon as it releases. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can find me at patreon.com/aquatazoo. And if you're looking to take a vacation and you don't know where to start, I happen to be a personal vacation advisor with Magical Vacation Planner, and I would love to help you out. It does not cost you anything extra. The links are in the show notes. Okay, thanks for listening. I heart your faces. Okay, bye.